In this episode of Smart Humans, we have special guest co-founder Vincent, Adam Katz, and we talk about everything from pre-IPO venture and what's going to happen in the pre-IPO markets.
Welcome to Smart Humans with Slava Rubin, presented by Vincent. In this alt investing podcast, Slava talks to amazing minds about their investment journey and finds out what it takes to make it in the markets. And now, here's your host and smart human, Slava Rubin.
Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of Smart Humans. And today's episode, I'm excited that we'll be talking about our predictions for 2026. 2025 was pretty crazy, lots to cover, but more important is what's happening next. With me today is special guest Adam Katz, co-founder of Vincent. Welcome, Adam.
Hey, Slava. Thanks for having me.
We're going to start with pre-IPO. So let's get into it.
Sounds good. So we're going to start with pre-IPO. Obviously, 2025 was a super interesting year. AI was the main story, but do you think that that's going to be the main story going forward?
Yeah, 2025 was interesting. I mean, if you back up, IPOs really were frozen for a while. We had well over 100 awesome tech IPOs in 2021. You could really inflate that with the bubble from COVID. And then they just fell off a cliff. 2022, 2023, we have like no IPOs. We start seeing a few IPOs in 24, definitely back into the dozens. And we have some more in 25, some notable ones like CoreWeave, Figma, etc. I think we're about to see the massive unlock, basically like the next wave. For those of us that are old enough, we remember the wave that happened with Facebook. Everybody was waiting for that wave around social media and Facebook. That was a massive unlock. Then you get frozen for a while, and then everybody waited for that Uber, Airbnb unlock. And we've been pretty much frozen for a while until then. I think we're about to have a huge wave of IPOs coming in 26. I can't guarantee that all of them are going to happen in 26. I think it's more of a 18 to 24 month wave, but I do think a lot of that wave is already going to happen in 26. So I do think it's going to be very exciting.
What are some of the companies that you think could IPO this coming year, or I guess in the next 18 to 24 months?
Yeah, there's so many. There's the big boys. There's SpaceX. Definitely people are talking now with the $800 billion valuation. Elon says he's going to IPO. That is news that when it hit the wire. I think it's like 23 years old. People thought that it would actually never IPO, and now Elon is saying it is going to IPO in 2026. So if I'm a betting man, I'm going to believe him that it's going to happen. There's some that are saying that it's not going to happen at all. It's just talk. I'm not in that camp because I don't think that's really necessary for Elon to put those words out. Then again, not everything Elon says happens exactly in the timeline that he says. But I do think there's going to be a SpaceX IPO, and I think it's going to be massive and very exciting. I mean, I think in aggregate, we're probably going to see a solid 8 to 10 huge tech IPOs between the SpaceXs, the Anthropics, potentially OpenAI, even though I don't think that one's going to happen. Potentially Stripe, I don't think that one's going to happen. I do think Databricks. I do think we can see Anduril. I think there's at the Canvas of the world. There's a lot of very interesting companies. And, there's also some smaller IPOs that could happen, whether it's like Turo or Goat or even Kraken, the crypto company probably will happen earlier in the year. Those are not as big, but I think we're going to see easily $10 billion of IPO happening across 8 to 10 massive companies.
With last year's IPOs, some of them were extremely successful. Some of them were less successful. Do you think that there's going to be any carryover from 2025 into 2026, or are these names just so big? I mean, the names that you're dropping, SpaceX, Anthropic, OpenAI, these would be way bigger than any IPOs from last year. So if you got even one, let alone two or three, I mean, I think that would kind of overshadow the entire market.
I think it's actually going to be very bullish for the market. I think it's going to bring a lot of excitement because I do think there'll be some volatility. I think it has to be in the right verticals. I think the hot verticals are AI. So very specifically, let's call it Anthropic. That's the one I'm really thinking is going to IPO in 2026. I think that defense like Anduril, super exciting. I think there's a high probability that they IPO in 2026. I think Databricks, very connected to AI, super exciting opportunity. Now, if you are, less connected to that stuff, if you're less into cybersecurity, if you're less into defense, if you're less into I do think it becomes a little bit more challenging. For example, Chime actually IPO'd earlier this year, and they're having a bit of a tough road. Wealthfront just IPO'd, having a bit of a tough road. I do think that we will see Plaid IPO in 2026. They're not my favorite to be jumping into, but I do think they'll IPO because I think fintech is tough. I think people are not as excited with these higher multiples with a company in that type of vertical. So I really think that overall it will be awesome. I am quite bullish. I don't know company by company. If I had to pick only two, I would say get into Anthropic today if you can. Get into SpaceX today if you can. Both are hard, but I think that this wave of IPOs could be exciting.
Are there companies that you think might IPO or are IPO candidates that you would not want to try and get into beforehand?
I mean, there's a lot of IPO candidates that I personally would not jump into. I already mentioned one, so I think Plaid is going to IPO. I think Bolt will IPO. They're again in the kind of last mile perspective, less interesting to me. One that probably will come out. It's uncertain how it will trade. Could be like a Discord. It's
Okay.
uncertain if that will see a lot of pop like a Reddit, because Reddit's done quite well since it IPO'd, or if it's going to struggle because it doesn't have the AI halo. So these are just some examples out there. I really would try to focus my energy personally towards Anthropic and SpaceX. I think Databricks is a great company as well. I think getting into Stripe would be good, but I don't think they're going to IPO right now. But I would personally be staying away from a more retail-y type of IPO, more of a straight SaaS type play. Those have the potential to struggle. Other areas that are doing really well again is like cybersecurity. There's potentially Sneak will come out. Let's see what happens with that. But CrowdStrike has been doing really well.
You've already kind of touched on this beyond the companies, the sectors. Last year, obviously AI, defense tech was big, cybersecurity was big. Do you see any kind of under the radar sectors coming this year? I mean, there's robotics, anything that not necessarily companies, but just sectors that investors should be looking into this year and the coming years.
Yeah, I think 2026 people are going to get much more familiar with robotics. I don't think you're going to see any robotics IPOs per se. I think there's going to be ways to play robotics in the public markets like Tesla and other opportunities, whether it's Aptronic or Figure, and there's others. I think there's going to be exciting opportunities to try to invest into those companies in the private markets. I don't think we'll be seeing that in IPOs. I mean, just to back up a hair, in the private markets, there are these monster rounds that are happening in pre-IPO, specifically in robotics and AI and defense. If you're not one of those three things, and I'll add a fourth, which is cybersecurity, if you're not one of those four things, actually VC is struggling. It is hard to raise capital. It is hard to have a venture fund. It is hard to raise capital. So those other areas that aren't getting that pixie dust from that AI kind of robotics trade, they're struggling. So I think that's going to continue actually. I actually think that the AI trade is going to get more breadth. And what I mean by that is people are going to be less looking to invest into straight AI foundational models like Anthropic. And they're going to be looking at the companies that are really starting to benefit significantly from AI. I think you'll see that play out more in the public markets, where you're going to start seeing the public markets look and demand for those returns to show up and those profit margins expand because of AI. But I think it'll be tough to find that in the private markets, but they'll be looking for those enabling type companies where who's benefiting from AI beyond just being straight AI.
Okay. I mean, so my perspective is that, some of these companies, OpenAI, Anthropic, people know these companies. They've gotten a lot more expensive in the last year. What are some sectors or some companies that might see that same kind of boost this year? And you're saying sort of not necessarily the AI models, but companies that could benefit from the AI halo. I mean, I'm just saying, like, what's the next AI, or is AI the next AI?
I mean, AI somewhat is the next AI. I still think Anthropic has a long way to run. Personally, I'm in the camp, hot take here, I'm in the camp that Anthropic is a $5 trillion company in the making. Not this year in 2026, but in the making.
I mean, that would make them the biggest company in the world.
Right. I do think they have the potential to be a very big company. I'm obviously showing my hand here that I'm kind of more long Anthropic than I am OpenAI, including with my own investments,
Mm-hmm.
partially because I think OpenAI, while actually bigger and more well known to the consumer, I think they have two issues. One, they're too widely spread across way too many fronts. They're not really focused like Anthropic. And two, I think their governance with their nonprofit structure and all of the related things has a lot of confusion. So I think if they could have, they would IPO in 2026. But I think they have a lot of work to do to clean that all up, to make themselves look clean for a public markets IPO. So I don't think that will actually happen in 2026. Now, I do think that there's, you know, it's kind of weird to say this because it's already been trendy, but I think defense and robotics is going to catch up as the next AI to the public. Like a lot of regular people know about Anthropic and OpenAI now. Not most regular people don't really know about robotics companies yet. And I do think it'll be much more normal for them to be aware of them existing this time next year, which I think is going to be a big shift, quite a bit. And I also think, similarly, sadly, the world is still in turmoil. There's a lot of geopolitics, there's a lot of conflict. I think as defense becomes more digital, people will become more aware of interesting defense companies beyond kind of your grandfather's defense company.
Sure. Yeah, I do think that Anduril will definitely be more of a household name this time next year.
Exactly. So Andrew, especially if they IPO, I can see them kind of being almost like a Palantir
Yeah.
style name that people trade. I don't know if they'll have as much revenue growth to play off of as Palantir, but then again, Palantir is a bit more mature to have that. But I wouldn't be surprised if it becomes like a Robin Hood darling.
Last question. Are there some smaller companies that you would recommend investors take a look at, whether in these particular verticals, whether it's, an Apptronic or Shield AI, or even a company in not one of these sectors, quantum computing or something just a little more under the radar that may not be something that breaks out in 2026. Maybe we're talking 2027, 2028, long term.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a couple of them. There's always interesting companies to look at in cybersecurity. There's always interesting companies to look at defense. It's hard for me to say who's going to be the next breakout because there's a lot of different viewpoints. But I do think that if you have a long time horizon and you're willing to go to zero and know that you failed, or you want to have a monster up, I think going after robotics is very interesting. So, the really expensive player there would be Figure. So
Yeah.
Figure is already worth like $39 billion with their last valuation. They're going after like world domination, trying to become $1 trillion company. So if you come in at 40 billion, a trillion is still a 25x. So that's exciting. But I do think an Apptronic with their connection to Google, which is less known, last trading at below 2 billion, but rumored to have a $5 billion valuation around the horizon. So probably a $5 billion entry point. Again, if you can get $1 trillion company potentially for $5 billion, like that's pretty insane.
Yeah.
It could become a zero, but I do think if you have a little YOLO money, I will probably put it into robotics and see what happens 5 years from now.
Great. I mean, it's pre-IPO. It is high risk, high reward. So, you've got to be prepared to go to zero, and hopefully you'll get some exponential gains.
Absolutely. I think 2026, I know I keep repeating myself, but I can't promise it's going to happen in January or in February, but I think it has the opportunity to be the first half or, a major part of a huge wave here that happens. Okay, awesome. So that covers our pre-IPO topics for 2026. Now,
Smart Humans with Slava Rubin is a podcast brought to you by the team at Vincent. Any data, text, or other content in this podcast is provided as general market information and not as investment advice. Past performance is not necessarily an indicator of future results. For more information on alternative investing, check out Vincent at www.withvincent.com.